Life Unrehearsed on CJAD 800. Brought to you by Marco Vendramini of IG Private Wealth Management. MarcoVendramini.com.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed. My name is Matt Delvecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing in the senior living industry.
And I'm Corrie Sirota, clinical social worker and psychotherapist, specializing in grief and loss.
Coming right up on the first half of today's show, four-time Olympian Silken Laumann will be with us. We'll be discussing her many accomplishments, including the bronze medal at the 1992 Barcelona Olympics, just 10 weeks after a horrific training accident to her leg. And we'll also be talking about how she's inspiring the youth generation during the pandemic. You know, Corrie, we like to highlight every now and then some good deeds. There are many, many good deeds being done across the city. And I want to bring up one that's coming up. It's a bunch of free meals will be given out to frontline workers at the McGill University Health Center this Wednesday. A group of financial consultants raised some funds and will be providing meals from the Hugues et Beaufort restaurant. So a shout out to Marc-André Nanté, who led the charge with his fellow colleagues at Jarislowski Fraser, as well as a few other generous donors from PricewaterhouseCoopers. Great job, guys, supporting our heroes on the front line. Just one of many good deeds being done. We're hearing more and more of them, Corrie.
It's so heartwarming. I love to hear them, and please send some in because it's really great to hear from you, and we love to give a shout out. All week we've been doing that. CJAD does that to give shout outs and recognition to all the wonderful support and work that's been out there. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Coming up on the second half of the show, do you abuse your feet? So many of us really do not recognize how poorly we treat our feet unless you're suffering from some pain. Well, thankfully, we have Dr. Rob Donaldson, who's a podiatrist, and he's coming on the second half of the show to help us start off on the right foot.
I get it, Corrie. Corey's always working on some lines to get me. Good one. All right. Well, you know what? We're so pleased to have our next guest. Four-time Olympian Silken Laumann is one of Canada's most inspirational leaders, a best-selling author, and a child and mental health advocate. Many of you may remember Silken's legendary and inspirational Olympic story. As reigning world champion, Silken fought back from a devastating rowing accident to win a bronze medal in the 1992 Summer Olympics in Barcelona. And in her best-selling memoir, Unsinkable, Silken shines a spotlight on all of the obstacles she has encountered and overcome. Silken speaks candidly about her athletic success and triumph over physical adversity, but also the intense personal challenges of her past and the fierce determination she applies to living a bold and successful life today. And most recently, Silken launched a not-for-profit organization aptly called Unsinkable that connects humans and life stories together to spark new insights around achieving whole health. Silken, welcome to Life Unrehearsed.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for taking some time on a Sunday from your beautiful part of the country in Victoria, BC.
Well, it's in the spirit of giving, right? We can all kind of give our presence and our energy to others. I was hearing you give the shout out to so many people in your community doing great things for each other.
Yeah, you know what? We need to get the word out, and there are so many great deeds going on. And so let's go back. Your life was just a little unrehearsed, Silken, in 1992 as you were training for the Barcelona Olympics. This was your third Olympics at the time in rowing, and you were the odds-on favorite to win gold in the single sculls rowing event. And so bring us back to that life-changing day when the accident occurred just 10 weeks before the Olympics. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's the ultimate lesson in if we ever need to learn like that our life is not completely in our control. I think that was probably my moment. I think as athletes, we're trained to control as many elements as possible, and that's certainly the mental state I was in going into the 1992 Olympics. I was the world champion, and 10 weeks before the Olympic Games, in a warm-up race in Essen, Germany, I was hit by a men's pair from Germany by accident, and their boat kind of like sideswiped my boat, and my boat was wooden and it shattered, really shredding the lower leg, breaking the bone, destroying the muscle and the tissue and some nerves. And then I was rushed to the hospital, and the doctors there, the trauma center, said that I would never row at a high level again.
This is, if you would see me, you have to see, as you could only imagine, the look on your face. Could you? The look, listening to you describe what happened to your leg is very, very overwhelming. So, here you were, Olympics around the corner. Some might say people wrote you off. That's it. Maybe you wrote yourself off. How did you possibly get yourself back into a position to race?
Well, I think to understand that, you kind of have to understand the mindset of our Olympic athletes. As we go into an Olympic Games, the world becomes smaller and smaller in a way, right? And I was very focused, even on an Olympic athlete standard, I was very focused. And so when somebody told me, the doctor told me I couldn't row again, it's like I couldn't really grasp those words, because it had been my dream since I was a little girl, and I had such a belief that I would overcome this, and that came really early, and it wasn't based on fact. It wasn't based on the reality that I had this huge open wound in my right leg, and there was only 10 weeks to go, but I so believed I could do it.
Good for you. That's mind over matter, right?
Obviously, yeah. Talking with Silken Laumann here, talking about her devastating injury. So it just wasn't, okay, let's let this heal. You had a lot to be done in those 10 weeks. What type of medical treatments were done?
Well, in a way, yes. The leg had to have a skin graft, and I had metal pins put through my right leg and a metal cage put over my ankle, and there was a metal screw put between my foot and my shin in order to keep my foot from dropping. So that was sort of the physical thing, but it was actually pretty low tech. It was, besides that part of it, it was doing hand weights in my hospital bed. It was a lot of visualization. When I got to Victoria, so I spent 10 days in the hospital in Germany, and then another 11 days here in Victoria where I live. And there things were a little bit more high tech. We had, weight machines, and I had the belief that if I worked my left leg, which was my leg that wasn't injured, that there would be muscle transfer over to my right leg. And of course, now that's been proven, right? That we know that when one part of our body is injured, if we work the other part, the part that's injured also begins to heal and lays down neural pathways that help us heal. But I went on a lot of instincts around what I needed to do. And I think, honestly, having that narrow, kind of almost hyper focus of getting to the Olympics and not being able to accept that it wasn't a reality, that worked in my favor.
I think it's incredible. You're listening to Silken Laumann. She's the 4-time Olympian and an inspiration to Canadians for sure across the country. So for those of us who didn't know this, you did compete and you got a bronze medal. But more than that, you also were Canada's flag bearer during the closing ceremonies. What was that like?
The whole thing was mystical. It was magical. It was kind of a wild ride. I was still so focused on healing and racing and all the things that, an athletic mindset creates. And yet there was also this sense of it not being real, because, all I had to do was look down at my leg, and I was still using a cane when I came to the Olympic Village. That, how is this even possible? And then when I won a bronze medal, the feeling, I think it was so much relief and sort of like a bit of a surreal experience, honestly. How did this just happen? And then complete exhaustion.
Right.
I don't think I really allowed myself to let go. And I remember talking to one of the reporters after my race, and I was just sort of sitting on a stool, and I just had this look, and she said to me, I don't think I've ever seen anybody look so exhausted in my entire life.
Well, Silken, I could speak on behalf of many Canadians, including myself, remember the moment very well. We were so proud of you. Silken, we have to head out for a traffic update. Will you hang around for us? Because we want to hear about this recently launched not-for-profit organization, aptly called Unsinkable. But first we have to head out to the CJD Traffic Center for an update.
Life Unrehearsed on CJAD 800. Brought to you by Marco Vendramini of IG Private Wealth Management. MarcoVendramini.com.
Welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corrie Sirota with my co-host Matt Del Vecchio, and we are talking to four-time Olympian and inspiration to Canadians all over the country, Silken Laumann. Silken, I just learned, as aside from all of what you do known throughout the sports world, that you just launched a nonprofit organization aptly called Unsinkable. Now, you've heard about what I do as a mental health professional. Something like this is very near and dear to my heart. Can you please share with our listeners what that's about?
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So for me, I've had my own journey in mental health. I grew up with a mom who had an undiagnosed mental illness, and there were all sorts of things that came with that, really, that I didn't understand as a kid. And it was only later in life when I started having kids that I really started paying attention to my own mental health and understanding, that I needed to do some healing work. And when I wrote my book, Unsinkable, I was very afraid. I was very afraid of being public with my story of how I struggled with depression and anxiety and sometimes rage. And when I shared it, what I learned is that so many people have a similar story. So many people have a journey, and all of us, of course, have a journey. But I felt that there was a lot of wisdom in kind of lived experience, and that we could all benefit by having a place to share our stories and share them with hope and help, share them with the spirit of helping others who might be struggling. And so I started this website. I guess it started at first. It's really become a social movement. We just launched Unsinkable Youth. We actually had a national televised broadcast just about 2.5 weeks ago directed at youth, where they were sharing what they were struggling with during COVID. But the idea is, as we start talking about it, not only do we reduce stigma, but we also start to understand that mental health is it's just like any kind of health. We invest in it. The more we understand it and we integrate it into our life, the better off we're going to be as communities and society. And I think we compartmentalize mental health in this, completely separate category to health and living fully. And in my mind and in my experience, we're just all humans on this earth, and there's the mental, there's the physical, there's the spiritual, and they're all incredibly integrated.
Mm-hmm. That's Silken Laumann here with us on Life Unrehearsed. Matt and Corrie. And Silken, I think you touched upon such an important issue that you've personally experienced regarding depression, anxiety, even rage that you've talked about, and perhaps the pandemic has brought out a lot of this as well. I know on previous shows we've had in the last couple of months, obviously anxiety levels are increasing, and so good on you for bringing this forward. And what I really like is that you're addressing a population, youth in particular, because sometimes youth may think these are adult issues when in fact youth are dealing with these very same anxiety issues. So you've created this nonprofit organization. So how does it work, Silken? Can youth just go on and perhaps get resources, or explain how that works?
Yeah, so actually our show, we partnered with Kids Help Phone. So we're not trying to be the resource side of it. We will, more and more, our resources will become robust. But I think there are organizations out there who do a much better job of creating resources, and we don't have any psychologists on staff. So when we did Unsinkable Youth, the show, we asked kids a series of questions, how the pandemic was affecting them, what parents could be doing better, what brought them joy, what they were looking forward to. And oh my gosh, the answers that they gave us, I think, every parent in Canada should have been watching that show, because it gave us insight into our young people. So we have, as you know, probably if you're around kids at all, they're very hooked into their phones. And we have Instagram, Unsinkable Youth, and what young people have been doing is they have actually been sharing their stories. Recently, with all the race riots in the United States and throughout Canada, we've been having a lot of stories from Black youth, songs, poetry, just ways of expressing what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. And the idea, of course, is that, by telling our stories, by sharing, by opening up and, saying this is our experience, that we help one another. And of course, also reduce the stigma around it, because everybody's got mental health.
Mm-hmm. No question about it. Really, really kudos to you for taking the lead, being the role model, and saying that even though I'm uncomfortable, I'm going to do this because I know it's important. And certainly I spend a lot of time talking to clients about name it, say it out loud, get it out. And that then you can have and learn about what resources are out there. So it's so incredible.
The thing is, we're afraid to name it because we're afraid of the stigma. We're afraid of the box, right? Mm-hmm. And yet the more that we start talking about these things, the more we start naming about it, they get outside the box. And we're like, oh, actually, this is part of the experience of being a human in this world. And, sometimes because of life, and like you were talking about what's happening with the pandemic, well, perhaps low-grade depression has always been there, nipping at your back heels. But you finally slowed down. And what's happened, you're noticing anxiety and, sadness. It's always been there. Right? And so it's by building our awareness. And of course, like I always say to young people, you've got to feel whatever you're feeling. So we're so afraid of the feelings.
Sure.
That we're always running ahead of them. But of course, ultimately, it doesn't work.
Well, I tell my clients, pain is inevitable, suffering is not. And what you're doing is giving them a venue for them to share their pain so that they no longer need to suffer. And when you don't suffer, when you know you're not alone.
Silken,
hugely important.
It's such a pleasure to have you take some time. Such an important initiative. I watched that Unsinkable Youth show on May 22nd. It is out there if you can Google it. And I would highly encourage you, if you got some teenagers and you're maybe a little concerned about their anxiety levels. And it was just an incredible event. Now, Silken, how could people find out a little bit more if they were about Unsinkable, and where should we direct them?
Yeah, so Unsinkable, we have a website. We are unsinkable.com. And then we're on all our social channels, either on Instagram. We have our separate channel, which is Unsinkable Youth. And really, it's just for the young people. We're wanting them to post and it be their channel. And everywhere else, it's Unsinkable.
Wonderful. Silken Laumann, thank you so much. 4-time Olympian. Wonderful story about Barcelona winning a bronze. But you know what? We have to make mention. You won a silver, too, in Atlanta, didn't you? 4 years later.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And another bronze in 84. I just stuck it out for the long haul until I had enough medals.
Well, way to go. Good for you. Continued success. And thank you for helping many, many Canadians. Silken, pleasure to be speaking to you.
It was a pleasure to speak to you as well. Take care.